Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a series of 11 webinars designed to give you practical information to help you accelerate the growth of your business. My name is Peter Jeffrey and I'm the Business Development Manager for the City of Greater Bendigo. On behalf of the City, we're proud to partner with the team at the Business Re-Education Centre in Bendigo to bring you high quality, practical information about how to grow your business through simple and effective actions and measures. Grab a pen and please be ready to take some notes so that you can be sure to implement the actions that you identify as appropriate for your business. I strongly encourage you to act on this advice, even if it's the most simple suggestion that captures your attention. At the end of this webinar, there will be mention to future events that I also encourage you to consider for further business support. At the City, I work within the Economic Development Unit and we're focused on bringing high calibre events and initiatives to you to enhance the success of the local business community and businesses like yours. If you would like to know more, please contact the team at the City of Greater Bendigo to discuss all available options for local small business on 5434 6000. Now, I'd like to introduce your presenter, Paul Henschel, who's the CEO for the Australasian region for Action Coach International. With over 20 years experience, I'm sure he's got some great information to share. So now it's over to you. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Peter. Welcome aboard everybody that's on the webinar this morning. It's a foggy, overcast sort of a day in Bendigo, and I think most people that are on the webinar are in this sort of region as I look. So as I say, thanks for getting up a little bit early and showing a great deal of interest into a subject which for a lot of people doesn't seem to have much, but unfortunately is extraordinarily necessary in terms of business. If finances aren't your thing, then unfortunately that means your business is going to be a little bit compromised, I guess, by the fact that you may not necessarily be all that interested in it. My objective today, folks, is to enable you to be or encourage you to be interested in it and just go through what it is, in fact, that you need to be interested and aware of in your finances. And the thing I have to say is that about when I've done webinars and seminars on finances, and I've done many of them over the years, when we survey the room, whether it be virtual or live, you'll be surprised to know, or perhaps not surprised to know, that about less than 10% regularly would suggest their level of financial intelligence is less than what they want it to be, and they themselves believe it to be, less than 10%. So the statement "finances aren't my thing" applies to around about 90% of businesses out there, and we'll have a look and see why that actually is. But where we'll start here is we'll start with the statistic that says that 80% of small businesses fail in their first 5 years. Now, fail meaning they stop, they close down. 80% of them fail because they fail to manage their profit and their cash flow. Now, the reality is that cash flow is the blood of a business, whether it be large or small, but very much the case for small business. Cash is, as I said, cash is king. Cash is the commodity, is the thing that you actually have to have in a small business. Small businesses can fail within 3 months, and mostly it'll be cash flow problems that cause that problem. The second thing is profitability, and that means that unless the business can maintain levels of profitability, of course it just won't produce the cash that it needs. And then finally, the third area will be more likely to be revenue. So this idea that revenue is the important thing in a business is completely false. Cash is the most important thing in your business, and we need to be able to understand cash flow. We need to understand the model of business flow and the profitability of your business. So that's an unfortunate statistic, but it's also one that you are completely in charge of. And that's the beauty, I guess, from this. This is the advantage of this, is that you are in charge of your level of knowledge around cash and profitability. You notice it's failed to manage their profits and cash flow. So you've got control over that, and that's what you need to grab hold of. The rationale, why is it so? You know, I've often thought to myself, well, why are financials so poor? This is what I've discovered that most businesses look like, and this comes from, you know, working with so many small businesses over so many years. This is the pretty much indicative of what I've seen to be the case personally over that period of time. The first is that their operational component is quite strong, and that's because, drink of water for me. That's because most people come from an operational base. It means that they've had a job in what their business is all about. It could be a hairdresser, they could be a plumber, they could be an accountant, they could be any trade, if you like. And most people have come out of university or as I say, or trade schools or something or other, and they've become very proficient in the trade of their business, and therefore their operational knowledge is quite high, their trade skill, if you like, whatever that might be. And don't get me wrong, you don't have to be a tradie to have a trade. I believe everybody has a trade. So, you know, everybody's core skills are in the operational component of their business. What happens then is that they're by almost forced, once they actually get out and start a business, or even when they're working for somebody else, they start to get an idea what marketing is all about. Now, they haven't gone off and potentially got a degree in marketing. In fact, I'd suggest that's not necessarily the way to learn marketing, but for small business at least. But what they find is once they're in operations, once they've got a business going, that one of the first things they do, well, how am I going to promote this business? What am I going to do to get sales? You know, that's their next question. And so they may start off with a poor knowledge of marketing, but that grows over a period of time. They try things, they find out what works, they find out what doesn't work. This financial component, which you can see by far is the smallest, it sort of starts to look like Mars compared to Jupiter here, that the rationale for that is that they believe that somebody else will look after their financials for them, that somebody else is looking out for their financials. You know, be it an accountant or their bookkeeper. I'd suggest their bookkeeper is more closely involved than their accountant. But still, sometimes that, you know, accountant might be touched on the business once a year, and primarily for tax purposes, folks, not for management purposes, for tax purposes. They might touch that once a year, bookkeeper might touch it once a quarter, but you're in it every day, you know, and as I say, a small business can go under in under 3 months with poor profitability and cash flow. So it's really important that you understand what this is. And I'll point out there that rationale around this, why people don't understand it, is because they confuse the appreciation of the technical component, the technical knowledge that's required for the business, as distinct to the proficiency in managing the business that does that technical work. I believe you should read that statement. Business owners confuse proficiency in the technical work of the business with proficiency in managing a business that does that technical work. In fact, you don't actually need to understand, you don't need to be proficient in the technical components of the work. In fact, most great businesses are actually managed by people who aren't necessarily proficient in the technical component of the work. Hairdressers, plumbers, they're actually run by business people more successfully than they are by the people within the technical area of the work. And why? Because, you know, if you can't do the technical work, then all you can do is manage other people to do that technical work and manage all of the other components of the business around that technical proficiency. So I guess the message here is, folks, get proficient at the business. Don't continue to try and get more and more proficient at the operational or the technical work of the business. Spread that. These circles should be around about the same size, and if anything, larger in finance and marketing than they are in operations. So let's talk about what financial intelligence is, and that's the term that I think we've got to refer to here, that you've got to become more financially, increase your financial intelligence. We talk about emotional intelligence. Look at FI, financial intelligence. And this is not about double entry accounting. This is not about becoming a great bookkeeper, and this is not about understanding MyObs or QuickBooks or Xero or any other, or SAP or any other accounting program or bookkeeping program. It's not about that. It's understanding what the numbers mean. So it's gathering the information and then understanding them so that you can change the outcomes, or as it says here, predict their intentions. So we've got to be able to forecast, and we've got to be able to establish strategies that will enable us to hit those forecasts. That's what financial intelligence is all about. I think sometimes people may think it's about being proficient at MyObs and QuickBooks and Xeros, or being able to do the books, being able to do double entry accounting. Completely unnecessary. My suggestion is get somebody else that can actually do that well, but what your job is to understand the outcomes of that job. So let's look at this. Financial intelligence comes from reviewing the past, forecasting to enable you to forecast the future, to be able to set strategies and plans to achieve that future, to then implement those strategies and plans, and have feedback, which is the test and measure component. So feedback, which is in the form of financial reporting, which you then review because it's already happened. Okay, so one of the interesting things about financial reports is that they refer to the past, but they are only useful to change the future. So again, we test and measure, which means we understand the financial outcomes. We review those financial outcomes. We can readjust, or we can reforecast and set new strategies, and so around it goes. One of the things here, and I'll put my cursor over there and draw a little circle around that, is this implement stage. Most important, folks, that in any case, in anything, that you actually implement. Otherwise nothing changes. And so there's the challenge. Okay, let's have a look and see what these statements actually are. Now, before the last one disappears, you'll see, it didn't disappear. Excellent. I must have changed my presentation sufficiently. Okay, so here's our 5 reports, our 5 financial reports. The balance sheet. Each of these, by the way, well, in terms of the first 2 at least, we'll go through a little bit more detail around what we get out of these. But the balance sheet is a measure of your asset base, if you like, what you own and what you owe. Very small letter between the two, isn't there? Only one letter between own and owe, but it makes a major difference to you, I'm sure. A balance sheet tells you what you own and what you owe at any particular point in time. A balance sheet is a photograph of the business at a point in time financially. It's a photograph. And similarly to a photograph, if I took a photograph of myself, or if you took a photograph of yourself, it is simply what you look like at that particular time. It doesn't say what you look like before the photograph was taken, and it certainly doesn't indicate what you'll look like after the photograph is taken. So, the only accuracy a photograph has is at the moment that it's taken. And the same thing with a balance sheet. The only accuracy it has is at the time that it's captured. And that's why balance sheets will always give a date. So it'll be the balance sheet as at a certain date, a time and date. And that's important because that's the way the business looked at that time. Okay, the second thing is the profit and loss statement. Now, I appreciate that most people, in fact, I'd be surprised if anyone on the call didn't necessarily have some sort of automated accounting system. I mentioned 3 or 4 already. These things are available at the push of a button, so there's no excuse to not have these things. So a profit and loss statement simply records the profitability or losses incurred over a period of time. The difference between a balance sheet, snapshot at a moment in time, profit and loss statement over a period of time, because it's a cycle. You need to understand when did this cycle start and when did this cycle finish. So a profit and loss statement will show you from and to, from the 1st of January to the end of January, from the 1st of February to the end of June, for instance. So it measures a period of time, and that's important. A cash flow statement is simply a statement of when did money come into my bank account and when did it leave my bank account. And the simplest cash flow statement that you can find, and I'm sure everybody's got one, is your bank statement. Your bank statement is a cash flow statement. It will tell you exactly when money landed in your account and when it left your account. And it's different to a profit and loss statement because time, and the difference is time. We'll talk a little bit about that further on. The fourth the fourth report is accounts receivable. That means money that you are owed. Who owes you money, how much, and for how long have they owed it to you? That's an accounts receivable statement. So it tells me my debtors. Debtors are the people that owe you money. Yep. And the fifth one is accounts payable, which of course is money you owe to other people. How much, who you owe it to, how much you owe, and when it's due. That's an accounts payable, which is a record of your creditors. Creditors are people that you owe money to. There's a few terms here that I'm sure people have used, you've heard used. Just get some appreciation of what these terms actually mean. So understanding, they're your 5 principal financial reports. Now let's have a look and see what we know about every business. And in terms of understanding cash flow, which I said is the most important thing in any business, cash flow is the most important thing. So let's understand what cash flow actually looks like. And you might think, this is a bit weird, he's put 5 targets up there. So you'll see them and we'll understand that your business model and your cash flow are tied almost completely together, and I'll show you why. So to understand the cash flow cycle, you need to understand your own business cycle. And to understand your business cycle, you understand your business model. Hope I haven't lost anybody yet, but let me explain that a little bit better. Okay, so here is a business model. It starts with working capital. I'll refer to it, say, as a clock here at 12 o'clock. We start with working capital. Now, working capital is usually your bank account, the money that you can access to keep your business going. Working capital means not so much establishment funds, but working capital is the day-to-day. It's like your accessible day-to-day bank account, the money that you use to keep your business going, and where your money that comes in goes back into. So you start with an amount of working capital. The next thing you do down here at about 3 o'clock on the clock is purchase something. Raw ingredients if you're a cafe, knowledge if you sell knowledge, people if you sell trades or services. Okay, so we purchase something. If it's just yourself, you've purchased knowledge through experience or degrees or reading or whatever, whatever investment you've made and you've purchased. You might have bought people to resell, that not in the terms of slavery, but in the terms of an employee or employees. So we make a purchase. In the case of manufacturing, we buy raw ingredients. The food industry is a manufacturing industry when you think about it. when you think of it. They buy raw ingredients, they buy bits and pieces, and then they have to do something to it to be able to sell it. Now, what we do to it is called down the bottom here at, say, at 5 o'clock on the clock here, value adding. Every business adds some sort of a value to its, let's say, its raw ingredients. So how do you add value, and how much value you add will determine what people will pay for it, or ultimately the pricing. So I think a lot of people underestimate the value that they add to their initial purchases. Let's say you're a retailer, and some people would sort of say, well, I just buy it in and then resell it. But here's the value you add. You've aggregated. You've gone out and got that. You've been able to source that. You've been able to access it. You've been able to bring it in to wherever you are. You've added knowledge to somebody and sort of say, tell me about this. You might have added an environment to that raw ingredient, meaning a shop or whatever, and you've provided people to actually sell that. That's how you've added value. And so the alternative is somebody would have to go and source those products themselves, learn about them, open accounts with all of these people, probably travel all around the world to actually get them. So don't underestimate the value that you add. In the case of manufacturing, of course, you bring together what is fundamentally separate ingredients of any sort, bits and pieces or ingredients or whatever, and you put them together. And I think a good example is simply a food outlet, a cafe or a restaurant. They bring together a whole lot of fresh ingredients, which in themselves don't constitute a meal, but you provide an environment, somewhere to sit down, music, service, warmth, all of these things, and you put the meal together and present it in that environment. That's called value adding, folks, to what you started with, which was individual componentry. So the effectiveness of how well you do that should set your pricing, not based necessarily on costs, but in fact, how much value does that add from my client's point of view? So think about that from a value adding point of view, but every business does that. At 7 o'clock, you'll see then it needs to market and sell that value added product or products or services. So it has to find ways to actually promote those products and services and convert that interest into sales. The last thing we need to do at about 9 o'clock on the clock in front of you is collect that money. Now, if you're a cash business, if you like, a retail business of some sort, you will collect that money almost immediately. If you deal with business to consumer, most of the time you collect that money immediately, and you collect it via a whole range of methods, don't you? Direct debits or direct credits, credit cards, cash. Not many people checks anymore. Long time since I've written a check, but that's the case of collection. An interesting thing that sometimes people forget about: what will be their collection process? So if you now think, and this is a finance lesson, I guess, not necessarily about business modeling, but here's the thing: if you said in your original business plan, this is how much money I'm going to start with, or in fact, if you start from here, here's what I'm going to purchase. Here are my suppliers. Here's the range that I'm going. Here's the range of people that I'm going to get supplied from. Here's how I'm going to add value to that. Here's how we're going to generate leads, and here's how we're going to convert those leads into sales. Here's how we're going to collect our money from sales, and here's how much working capital we're going to need to continue to go around, for this business to go round and round the circle. You can see that's just moments in time. This is a time-based process. That would then fundamentally be your business model, and you would be able to develop a business plan, certainly an initial business plan around exactly those 5 targets. Now, what's interesting is your cash flow follows that model. So your cash flow goes from working capital, it makes purchases, that's cash out. It then adds value to that, and that's going to cost you money in the first place. That's going to be an outgoings. You're then going to undertake marketing and selling processes. that will be money out. So here's where your money comes in, that collection. I guess the understanding here that collecting money is the only, this one target here at 9 o'clock is the only one that actually brings money in, and it goes back into your working capital. Now, the amount of working capital you'll need is subject to how long this cycle takes, and of course, how much it costs you as you go around the cycle. Hopefully, that's a really important thing to take on board, a really important lesson, is to really appreciate where money goes and how it goes and how quickly it can go. Okay, we'll move on, and we'll look at this now in terms of capturing this in terms of the 3 statements. So I've been through the cash flow cycle. We started with cash, we bought goods, we added value, we sold them, we got paid, we collected them. That's the cycle that we've just been through. Now I'll show you how this actually relates to a profit and loss statement. A profit and loss statement fundamentally is made up of only 5 things: sales, purchases, the cost of purchases, one minus the other is your gross profit, and operating expenses. Operating expenses, gross profit minus operating expenses equals net profit. Accounting terms will see things like, we'll often refer to this net profit as EBIT, earnings before interest and tax, or PBIT, profit before interest and tax. So just so as you're familiar with the term, we're not worrying about tax for the purposes of our exercise here. We're talking about pre-tax profit. So sales, purchases of goods and direct purchases, gross profit, operating expenses, net profit. Let's have a look and see how these relate. So when you sell a product, it goes to sales. When you purchase stock, inventory, it will be recorded as purchases or cost of goods sold. The difference between the two is your gross profit. The percentage of one over the other is gross margin. So the gross profit over divided by sales is gross margin. That's a percentage. So let's say sales was 100,000, or well, let's talk about in small numbers. Let's say sales was $100, purchases was $30, gross profit was $70. Your gross margin would be 70%. Operating expenses are generally associated with those things that are value adds to the initial product purchase, rents, wages in most cases, marketing costs and things like that. Things that are actually indirect costs against the profit. So it means that they're primarily costs that you'll incur whether you sell anything or not. And then finally, net profit is what we're really talking about here, net profit. So how does that relate to a balance sheet then? Let's look at a balance sheet. A balance sheet is, as I said before, things you own, assets, and things you owe, liabilities. Pretty simple. Owe, assets, own is an asset, owe is a liability. The difference between the two is called your equity. Now, as an example here, I'll use just say your home, your own family home. If that home was valued at $500,000 and you owed $300,000 on it, your equity in it would be the difference between the two, $200,000. So the business is exactly the same. The equity that you own in the business is simply the asset minus the liability at any point in time. Now, in your case, you might be the sole owner of the business, in which case, you've got 100% shareholding. A share in a public business is exactly the same. It is the equity at any particular time divided by the number of shares. So you'll appreciate now why stock markets or shareholdings or share prices go up and down, because the assets and liability base are changing all the time, and therefore the equity is changing, and so is yours. So let's look and see how the profit and loss relates up to the balance sheet. So let's assume that the business made a net profit. That net profit goes to one, two, or all three of these places. So it can go to the owner as retained earnings or dividends to the owner. and that will increase your equity stake. It can also go to buying more assets, more stock, or more land. Well, I've got here land, buildings, plant, equipment, or operating assets, stock. So it can buy more assets, or it might choose to use some of that net profit to reduce its liabilities, repay loans, taxes, etc. So it will reduce its liabilities. So it's interesting that when people say, you know, they get their say their annual statement, and it says that you know, the business has made a certain net profit, and the first thing I often hear is, well, I don't know where it is. Where did it go? What you mean is it's not in your bank. And here's why it may not be in the bank. It may well be either been retained by the owner, it will have been used to buy more assets, or it will have been used to pay down debt. And so, don't use your bank account as your profit indicator. They're completely different animals. Okay, so if you understand this page, then you'll get a pretty good idea about how these statements actually relate to each other and what's going on in terms of finances. So, you know, financial intelligence, half of it is just on this page. If you understand that, then your level of financial intelligence within the last 30 minutes has probably grown exponentially. So understand that those two areas which we're going to look into further. So the first one's going to be the balance sheet. Looks like the most boring of animals in the world. However, the balance sheet is extraordinarily important to understand the health of your business at a particular point in time. It measures assets, liabilities, and equity. If you looked at your balance sheet, and I encourage everybody after today's webinar to go and print your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement just to get used to looking at it, you'll see that once upon a time, of course, we used to have assets on one side and liabilities and equity on the other, and they had to add up to each other. So assets equals liabilities plus equity. You see, you can play with that formula of those three things any way you like. So assets on the left-hand side, liabilities and equity on the added up to each other on the other, and those had to balance, and that's why it was a balance sheet, called a balance sheet. So what changed was the asset base. Let's say the asset base was 200,000 and the liability was 150,000. The equity must have been 50. So the equity changes according to the assets and liabilities, and they have to balance. That's the reason why it's called a balance sheet. So asset distribution, what can you tell from a balance sheet? You'll find your working capital, your bank accounts will be there, your cash levels will be there, usually at the top. The next thing you'll see is stock valuation. If you maintain stock, of course, you'll see your debtor level in there. So how much do people owe you? If you're a business that runs a WIP means work in progress. And I encourage anybody that actually does relatively long-term work, that means over a month. The work will take over a month to run the thing called a WIP file, work in progress file. It means that as you do work on that job, you if you like, attach it to the job in work in progress, and at the end of the month, say, this is particularly useful for professional services, trade services, consulting, all those sorts of things, which is a professional service. Things that take quite a bit of, it can easily run over a month. You would accumulate that. As the work is happening, it's registered against that an open invoice, which becomes work in progress, and at the end of every month, you would simply close that invoice, or you wouldn't close it, you'd send it, you'd close it, send it to the person that you're doing the work for, and then it would become a debtor. So because once it's been invoiced, it's a debtor. So we've said working capital, so that's cash in various places, stock valuation, debtors, how much people owe, work in progress if you have it, and equipment base, so how much that's worth. Your working equipment, the fit out and fixtures and IT and all of those sorts of things, what they're worth at a particular moment in time, you'll appreciate that they're worth less and less generally as time goes on, and that's called depreciation. So that's also going to be in there. So your equipment, long-term equipment, depreciates. That means that it uses up some of its value, and so it should as it gets older. And that's why depreciation is a tax deduction, because it's a valid depletion of the asset. Hopefully that's understandable. We won't go into all the issues about depreciation. That's a much longer topic. But fundamentally, that's what you'll find from your balance sheet on the asset side. On the liability side, you'll find the creditors, people you owe money to, and that'll be short term. Mostly that'll be for supplies and things that you more likely need to repay in, 14, 30-day type periods. You'll probably see there are longer term loans like a business loan, and you should see things like HR liabilities, like provision for long service leave, annual leave. These sorts of things are an increasing liability to your business because they must be paid. Now, taxes are also obviously a liability. That they are amounts of money that need to be paid. So on the liability side, you'll see these things. Now, I mentioned the HR one because it's one that sometimes people can get a little bit stuck with. Sick leave, not so much, because sick leave is not payable if somebody leaves, but certainly their holidays are, their annual leave and their long service leave, if they're qualified for it, of course. And many businesses nowadays start a provision for long service more or less after about 3 years. Some of them start it straight away, but about 3 years, because it's now cash-inable at about 7. So, in some awards it's 5. So, it's become much more real. Although, of course, people are staying in their jobs, in the same job for shorter amounts of time. So, at the same time, long service leave is becoming something that's not necessarily as takeable as what it used to be. So that's an increasing debt, and I say that because, and this also goes to the fact that, how long should you leave people, a HR issue around not taking their holidays. The reality is that they get paid, their holiday pay gets paid out on the rate that they will leave your business at, which means if they've accumulated holidays over 10 years, you're probably paying twice as much for it as what you would have paid if they had taken their holidays and at the time. So what I'm saying, I guess, folks, is don't allow too much of an accumulation of debt in your leave area, just as a bit of a tip. Okay, so they're the things you can get from your balance sheet. So if you print out a balance sheet and you look at yours, you'll find all of those things are there, or certainly should be there. So the sorts of things, so we understand our cash levels, we understand our debtor levels, and the average collection days. Well, what that means is how much is owed to me and how old is the debt. Again, print a debtors list, find out who owes you money and how old that debt is. Look for old debt that's large. That's where you should be focusing to bring money into your business. Obviously, your creditor levels, which is how much money you owe and how long on average you're taking to pay it. Your stock turn, if you've got stock, you can tell that from your balance sheet. It means how often your stock turns over in times in a year. Stock turn is measured in days. So if you had a stock turn of 365, it'd mean the value of your stock turned over every day. If you had a stock turn of 1, it means it takes a year for your stock value to turn over. That's important nowadays. A word of warning: don't overstock. Don't hold too much stock. You can measure your stock turn and get a good feel for what it should be. Somewhere between 365 and 1, I would suggest. And work in progress, if you're a service-based business, you can always tell that. So they're the things that we can tell from a balance sheet. I want to look at and bring up a few things here that will provide for the cash gap. And the cash gap means the difference between money going out and money coming back in. So you're paying for things as you go, but you're collecting money perhaps at a lower rate, a lower frequency, and maybe not very well. What that does is produces a cash gap, or obviously a gap in your cash, money going out before money comes back in, and that's called cash gap. And I want to just show you a dozen or so strategies that I've used over a long period of time to reduce that cash gap, which means get money in faster than money going out, because that's cash flow. Okay. So things like partial or full deposit repaid up front. None of these, by the way, are rocket science. They're all fairly obvious, but they're all things that I've used and have had to be used because the businesses weren't doing these things. So get a deposit or partial monies up front, at least in equivalent to the amount that it's going to actually cost you in hard cash to buy, say, materials in or whatever. It says finish projects so they can be billed. So often I've seen people, particularly trades, that have got unfinished work all around the place, perhaps waiting for a rainy day, as they say. And you might not be any better. You've got unfinished work and it can't be billed until it's finished, so finish them so that you can get your money, you can complete it. And this is the next one. Bill it immediately it's completed. Don't let it sit there for a week or 2 weeks, or don't do invoicing at the end of the month. Invoice as jobs are finished. That's the only way you're going to get regular cash flow in, is to send regular statements, bills, not statements, but bill invoices out. They should match. Okay. Systemize your process. Don't allow it to be when I feel like it, when I get around to it. Make sure that you've got a billing process that's systemized. Ideally, one that's tied to time frames or whatever, even if it has to be systemized through a person. Designated personnel to collect money. I remember putting in place a reward system for a debt collection side of, or accounts receivable side of a business, such that a person that ran that department was paid the same commission rates as the salespeople. So, but they were paid on collections, and that really encouraged a greater rate of collection. Do it regularly. I've already mentioned. Shorten your terms. You might find you're offering 30 and getting paid in 45. Offer 15, get paid in 30. Look for some ways to shorten your terms. Don't keep sending the same invoice or the same statement week after week, or fortnight after fortnight, or month after month. Increase the way or change the way that you're collecting. So, the utility departments found out a long time ago a really easy way to do that was they changed the colour of the paper, and you're probably nodding your head at this point in time going, I remember that. You first of all got a white one, the second one you got was yellow, the third one you got was pink, and people said, oh, I don't pay until I get the pink one. It was really interesting that in one particular business that I can remember quite well, we changed the colour of the paper to green of the invoices, and they got paid faster. Go figure. I don't know. It's psychology, I guess. But hell, use it if you can. Give discounts for early payment of invoices. These discounts are a lot cheaper very often than the cost of cash. So certainly the cost of not having available cash in your business. If you can add interest to overdue accounts, but that must be part of your terms of trade. If you want to change your terms of trade, you simply change your terms of trade. You put it out to your customers, and you notify them that if they continue to trade with you, it's under the new terms. That's how you change those terms. Outsource the process of billing and collection processes. Again, you might think it's cheaper for you to do it. It's not. It's generally less expensive for somebody else to do it than you doing it yourself, or potentially not doing it regularly at all. This one means reduce inventory by low inventory trigger points. So what that means is don't hold as much stock, just have a better system of reordering when your stock hits a certain level. Have a systemized approach and sort of say, I don't need 30 of them, I actually only need 10 of them. I just need a good system of reordering so that I don't run out. That's what that means. If you can replace stock in 3 days, you don't need 30 days worth of stock. You need 3 to 5 days worth of stock and good reordering systems. And that will reduce your stock holding considerably, and therefore the amount of money you've got tied up in dust collectors in a lot of cases. Okay, a couple of them, negotiate longer terms. So go back to your vendors, to your suppliers and say, hey, I'm a good payer. If I guarantee I'll pay in a certain amount of time, if I guarantee it, can I have longer terms? I've been a good payer, I'm reliable, all the rest of it. I want to increase my my payments from cash to 14 days or from 14 days to 30, etc. So all of those are useful strategies. Okay, I want to move now to profit and loss. Conscious of the time, I want to move to a profit and loss statement. And a profit and loss statement, as I said before, is made up of 5 things: sales, cost of goods, gross profit, fixed costs, and net profit. Now, the first thing you need to do is look at these 2 things. You'll see that these are both costs. One's a direct cost and the other one is an indirect cost. Sometimes the top one's called a variable cost and the bottom one, the fixed one's called, it's called fixed or non-variable cost. The first thing you need to do is go through all the costs of your business and appreciate which of those are variable, which means which of them go with a sale and which of them go are incurred independently of any sale, and get them assigned correctly. So open up a cost of goods if you don't already have it. If you look at your profit and loss statement and it says sales and expenses and all of your expenses are in one group, then immediately change it. You need to be able to break these things in at least into 2 sections. Now, an accountant won't care because revenue minus costs equals net profit. We care from a management point of view because we need to understand those costs. And we need to understand the 2 profits, the gross profit and the net profit, not just one bottom line. Accountants, mostly from a tax point of view, only care about the bottom line because that's all they're interested in terms of tax. You pay tax on the bottom line. We manage a business much more differently than that. So we want to actually split the costs between direct costs and indirect costs. Let's now put up some examples and I'll just show you as an example this business, whether this is a day's takings, a week's takings, a month's takings or a year's takings, it doesn't really matter. They're just incomes. So it's this business, it's $20,000 in sales, $5,000 in direct costs. Let's say this was a cafe. Those direct costs would be raw materials, packaged drinks, those sorts of things. It's got a gross profit of 15. It's got overhead costs of 10, rents, permanent wages, leases of equipment, those sorts of things that don't matter whether you sell a bean or not, and it ends up with a net profit of $5,000. That we want to look at, the first thing we want to do is be able to look at that in terms of percentages. So we talk about costs of goods as being 25% of sales. We look at this one in case gross profit is 75% of sales. All of these expenses, all of these percentages are referenced to sales, the sales amount. So 5,000 divided by 20,000 is 0.25, which is 25%, 75%. Fixed costs, $10,000 is 50% of sales. And in the end, net profit is 25% of sales. Now, what's a good net profit? Well, folks, I would suggest that anything above 15% net profit is a pretty reasonable benchmark for your business to aim for. If it's doing better than that, hey, well done, make it more. But if it's doing less than that, aim for 15%, even if it means you adjust your pricing so that you're, or reduce your fixed costs or your supplier base so that you can start to look at getting your net profit around about this sort of 15% plus. Now, I use these percentages because they're a lot easier to track than dollars. These dollars are easy because they're round figures, but yours won't be round figures. What's really important is to track this thing here, which is called gross margin, and the one down the bottom here, which is called net margin. There's 25% net margin, 75% gross margin. We refer to those, that's how you refer to those. So what's important here is to understand what you're currently doing. What are your current margins? What's your industry? What's your own, they're called benchmarks. What's your business's current margins or current percentages? and use that as your benchmark. Here's an interesting thing. You can also go to the ATO, Australian Tax Office site, and you'll find the benchmarks for most industries in Australia, for most business types in Australia. ATO's website, benchmarks, and you'll start to see things like for retailers in certain industries, what's their percentage they pay in rent, what's their percentage for wages. So start to appreciate what the benchmarks for your industry are. Once upon a time, these were available through accounting firms and different things. Nowadays, if you want a full set of benchmarks for your industry, it's about, last time I checked, about $800 or $900. If you want the full set of benchmarks, which is the detailed breakdown of your business, your industry, the businesses within your industry. If you want it broadly speaking, go to the ATO for free and get them from there. But understand what they are, and so that you can start to work on them. So how would I improve the gross profit? I would increase my sales have to go up, or my sales revenue has to go up in reference to the cost of goods. So I could source materials for less. I could get a better price on those materials. I could increase my prices. Yeah, I can start to do a lot of different things to increase my gross profit. How do I increase my net profit as a function of gross? And you'll see that these are also, so if sales is 100%, 100 minus 25 equals 75, 75 minus 50 equals 25. The percentages actually work the same way that the dollar values do. You can add and subtract them, in this case, or subtract. So you can start to see where your costs are split across different areas. Are they direct costs that are costing me? Is that a pricing thing? Is it a supplier thing? Am I wasting materials? You know, wastage. Theft will come up in this area here. Will come up as a function of gross margin, and the sorts of things that are costing me money, you know, that I'm paying for day in, day out, that aren't a part of sales. I can start to look at how I could actually affect, if you like, reduce those fixed costs as a function of sales. Of course, if they're fixed, if sales go up to say 30,000, this percentage, your cost of goods will stay still at 25%, but your fixed costs will actually stay at 10,000 predominantly, and this fixed cost margin will be 33%, 1/3 of 30,000, and therefore your profit margin will go up just as a function of that. So hopefully that's making sense to everybody, and if it does, we'll move to this. How do we use a profit and loss statement? Well, we can monitor, we call individual and GP. So whilst that gross profit was the gross profit of the whole business, you would also appreciate that you could split the business down into segments. The sales would be split down potentially into 6, 10, 20 different product groups or product lines. Each one of those has a gross profit. So if you were able to monitor the sales from each area of business and the costs associated, direct costs associated with that area of business, you would understand the gross profit of that line, of that product line or that service line. Most important to understand which of your service lines are producing the highest profitabilities, and of course what you should be looking to do then is sell more of those and less of the low margin, low return products. So it starts to affect the range that we actually stock within our business. Adjust product and service offerings, and this is what you do after that. Once we've appreciated what the gross profit is from each of our product lines or service lines, we can start to adjust them. We can market one more, we can drop some, we can actually influence the sale of better performing products or services, and potentially reduce the input into the low ones, or even get rid of them. So it's starting to change the nature of our business simply by understanding these things. You can set prices based on a minimum GPS, gross profits. The S should be little. Gross profits. Set the prices. It says, okay, if I'm going to have this product, it has to return this as a minimum gross profit. And therefore I put the price up or down so that it produces that. If it doesn't, then it does one of two things. If I put the price up of a product or service, it'll either get that gross profit or you'll get rid of it. Either one's okay, but you won't allow it to sort of sit there in limbo, as it were. So you can use it to set prices. You can use it then to set sales targets. You can appreciate how much of each of these products do I need to sell to achieve the profitability in my business. So we're really now starting to use all of this to actually drive profits or set performance levels and mark out and set the future and have targets to aim for. So we can control overheads. We understand where our money's going, what's producing return, what's not producing return. And as a percentage of sales, it might be a case of sort of saying, okay, I'm going to have to either increase the sales or I've got to reduce some of these overheads to match. Okay. I said about benchmarks, the first thing you want to do is meet them, then you want to try and improve on them. So if you already know that I'll give you an example that I know that for a cafe, for instance, the benchmark for cost of goods has got to be around about 30% or less. 28% is a good cost of goods in a cafe restaurant, and that means the cost of their raw materials, etc. So 30%. So I remember working with a business once, and the first thing I looked at was their profit and loss statement, and it said that the gross margin, the cost of goods was 43% of sales. So straight away, we knew we had to do a few different things. Number one, I had to look and see how are you buying these goods? And of course, they were buying them at full retail price instead of wholesale pricing. We changed it to wholesale pricing, got their cost of goods down to closer to 30%, and then started working on a couple of other things as well, including pricing, so that their gross profit came under 30%. Once we got that, we started to see real profits on the bottom line. So understanding the benchmarks is a really important factor in actually first meeting them and then bettering them. Okay. An interesting number that you need to know, and this is why you need to split those costs between fixed costs and variable costs, is because the most important number, in my opinion, is, and hopefully I just noticed we're nearly out of time, but I'll keep going. Well, I hope you can bear with me for a little bit longer because we've still got some pretty important stuff to cover, although we're nearly there. Break even. Break even is the value of sales, or the amount of sales that you need to make to produce neither profit nor loss. Very quickly, it's fixed costs in dollars, so $10,000 over gross margin, maybe that's 75%. So you'll appreciate that if you just do that as a mathematical formula, put the amount of dollars that it costs you for fixed costs over the gross margin, you'll appreciate what your break even is, and that is the amount of sales that you make, the dollar amount of sales that the business needs to make neither profit nor loss. Now, of course, you don't want to make a loss, but knowing what the bare minimum is in sales is a massively important thing. And the second thing is, how is that achieved? So you've got to appreciate, well, and I'll give you an example. A bricklayer that I remember said his break even was $2,500 per day. He charged $1 a brick, and therefore he knew that he had to lay 2,500 bricks every day to make neither profit nor loss. That was his break even. So if he laid more than 2,500 bricks, he made money. If he laid less than 2,500 bricks, he lost money. Now, he knew that on a daily basis, not a year later when his tax was being done, a daily basis. And so he could measure and monitor and change tomorrow's bricklaying rate so that he wasn't finding at the end of the year that he'd lost money. And you need to understand, what does it mean to me? I can work out my break even, and then I understand, well, how many sales on average does that mean for me, or how many customers, or how many clients, or how many of each of what does that mean? Understand that. Okay, very quickly then, the last thing is your financial ratios. Now, these are just one number compared to another, and we've already covered most of these. The sorts of things that I think are important: gross profit margin, operating expenses margin, and net margin we've already talked about. Return on owner's equity is simply how much do I get every year versus how much did I invest. So if I draw $10,000, I invested $100,000, I'm getting a 10% return on equity, same as a shareholding. Okay. Short-term risk is current ratio. very simply, that's current assets over current liabilities. In your balance sheet, you'll see an entry there that says current assets. They're the things that you will convert to cash in under 12 months, and current liabilities, those things that will need to be paid out in under 12 months. When you put assets over liabilities, that's called the current ratio, and a healthy business should be better than 2. You should have twice the current assets that you have current liabilities. If you have more current liabilities than more current assets, formally, officially, and theoretically, you're trading insolvent. So that's an important number. Just very quickly, I'll go to a couple of these others. Stock turn we've talked about. Collection period, how long on average does it take me to actually collect my money? And this one, understand turnover per employee and use it as a monitor. Use it as to be able to monitor your improvements in your business. I've got my turnover's $500,000 and I've got 2 employees. I've got $250,000 per employee. Now, if that number goes up, it's going well. If the number's going down, it's obviously going the wrong way. You've also got to be careful that you don't try to achieve too much turnover per employee, because it's a measure of maybe their production levels and their stress points as well. And of course, the last one here we've talked about is break even. So they're called financial ratios. They're a very easy way to assess the health of your business, simply by understanding, I think there's 11 there, by understanding those financial ratios. And ratios meaning just one number compared to another. So that's all it means, financial ratio. It's actually how a bank assesses their risk level. It's about how a bank assesses your financial health of a business. You can do it in 10 minutes and they can come back and say, yep, sure, no worries, we'll give you a loan, or not give you a loan, and you'll think that was weird. How did they do that in such a short time? They're fundamentally using financial ratios to assess the health of your business right now. Okay, so we're just about finished, and here's where to start. Make sure your expenses are categorised correctly. Your expenses are split between variable and non-variable costs. Once you do that, you can work out your break even. You can establish your own benchmarks. You'll understand what your own percentages are, and you can go to the ATOs, or you can buy the set of industry benchmarks. You can start to set sales targets appropriate to the amount of profit that you want to make. So you can predict, you can say, okay, what do I need to sell for me to produce a profit of this amount? So we're now starting with the end in mind, which of course is a big principle of business. What you do then is you develop the strategies, the marketing and sales and range and product marketing strategies, so that you hit those targets. That's what a budget's for. A budget's not to monitor, it's there to achieve. Share the results with your team if you've got one, a team that is, meaning this is what we're aiming for. And I'd suggest that, open your books to your team. For the most part, most people think you make a lot more money than you do, and they're much more involved when they actually understand the business side of the business as much as possible, and implement. And I said that right at the start. What's important here is to implement. You must start to do some of this stuff, not just know it or think it. Do it. And that is, as I say, the opposite of procrastination. So hopefully, I did get a question earlier in the prior to the start of this, which said, what are the 3 to 5 things I need to know on a monthly basis to assess my business's financial health? Certainly those, I'll go back to this, and these financial ratios will certainly give you an idea. But the answer to the question is cash levels, net profit, gross profit, debt level and age, and this current ratio, quick ratio. It's often called quick ratio, current assets over current liabilities. I'll go through those again. The cash levels in the bank at the end of every month, or more often, but the question was on a monthly basis. Cash levels, net profit, gross profit, as both dollars and percentages, debtor level, how much are you owed and how old is that debt, and the quick ratio from your balance sheet, which is current assets over current liabilities. So hopefully that's the answer to that question for the person that asked that question. Great. Just want to quickly run through your next, the things that are quickly coming up. People like to know these things. The 27th of August, we've got a seminar here in Bendigo called 6 Steps to Growing Your Business. Last time we put that on, I think we had 80 odd people attend that. It's in the same venue as last time, and it's part of Small Business Month. So 27th of August is 6 Steps to Growing Your Business. Wednesday the 9th of September is our next webinar, and it's all about team. And to register for any of those, just go to businessreeducation.com.au and you'll find the links to register the same as you have for this one. And you want a replay of this, and this has been one of those ones that's been information heavy and sort of data heavy. I get that. Less pictures, more words, more numbers. Go back to the replay of this. It'll be available on our website hopefully later this afternoon. Go back and actually do it and understand it and do it again, and I think you'll get a better understanding again. It's only an hour or so contribution. Or do it at, maybe tomorrow or something, and see if you can get a little bit better understanding. It's been a pretty hefty session this morning on finances in 1 hour, but hopefully what you've gotten out of it will actually has increased your financial intelligence by, let's say, I don't know, maybe 100, 200, 300 or 1,000%. Because if you came on this in the first place that said finances aren't my thing, then clearly what we've been through today now enables you to be less scared, more confident, and the only way to become more confident after this is to start to make sure you put these measurements in place, print these reports, print them, get your reports to come out the way that you want them, and understand them, go through them as often as you can, at least once a month. And start to get an understanding of what's going on in your business. It's massively important. So many people I talk to don't know their profit. They don't know their cash position. They sometimes don't even know their revenue. But revenue is not the answer, guys. You've got to actually be able to understand these financial reports just to the point that you can actually change your business. It's not about bookkeeping. It's not about accounting. It's not about tax. It's about financial management. And understanding the business's finances is the scorecard, the scoreboard of the business. It's like going to a sporting game and they don't put the score up. It's like, yeah, good game, don't know who's winning. That's the challenge. So I wish you well in your pursuit of increased financial intelligence. There's some great books out there, one called Financial Intelligence, which I'd recommend. But certainly, don't be scared of the numbers, and as long as you stay scared, you won't do anything about it. Decide to improve your financial intelligence, and your business will have to improve. It can't not improve as a consequence. So, again, quickly, businessreeducation.com.au/webinar recordings, you'll find this, and eventually, when I say eventually, it takes a bit longer for the council to get it up onto their website, bendigo.vic.gov.au/business. Thanks everybody. Look forward to our next webinar on in September, or hopefully I'll see you at the seminar on the 27th of August. I wish you well, and again, all the best with your financial intelligence. Bye for now.